not sure you noted at the start of the show with Elise with her glasses on, she's pretending to be an accountant, but that's the real accountant that you just saw then, Dale. Yeah, good time of the year to be catching up with all the news. So if you're a landlord, you've got 2 or 3 days to go. Prepaying of your interest for the next year is something that quite a few people do at this time of the year. Lots of things to be put in order before that midnight on the 30th of June. Now, in the studio here today, as our last show of our Series 1, I guess if you like to put it that way, we have Mr. Tim Threadgold, who's a mate of mine, we've worked together forever, and Kerry Ackermans. Hello, Kerry.
Hello, Anthony.
Now, Kerry runs property management. Tim runs me. We try to run the joint, don't we, mate?
Yeah, right.
And Tim has been known to hijack this show as Threadgold TV. So I happen to be in the driver's seat today for the last show, but these guys have been instrumental in the whole Toop TV exercise. So Tim, a couple of just if you like to round off the year, the financial year, and that just the last 12 months for sales in Adelaide, South Australia. What do you reckon?
Well, one word I reckon at the moment: roller coaster. I reckon the beginning of the financial year was really hard work. We've come out of a period of 3 or 4 months where it's been great, and the jury's out in terms of where we're at the moment. There's lots going on at the moment: interest rates, politics, all sorts of stuff going on. So it's a really interesting space we're at the end of this financial year.
Tim, it's been described by others to me as the classic patchy market. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think, as I said, late last year it felt like it was hard work. Early this year we thought, wow, this is going somewhere, and now it just feels like it's wobbly again.
Can we admit something on air?
Yeah, absolutely.
Put on record. I thought Sylvia and I and the Toop team were pretty clever because we had February, March, April record months ever, including the boom time. So we're sitting back, how clever are we? But the reality is the market did fire, didn't it?
Well, the market did fire, but take a little bit of credit. I'm sure that there's something in all of that. Look, as you said, a patchy market. It's really hard to make predictions. It's really tough for people who are putting their houses on the market if they're pre-planning. My feeling is that if they're wanting to put their house on the market, they pick their moment when they think the market's feeling good and just get on with it, rather than sort of thinking, oh, I'll wait for a month or two and program it out, because the market will have changed by then.
Tim, we'll come back to some factors in a minute, but before we do, rentals. As our General Manager of Property Management, Kerry, what is happening here with rentals?
Well, what's really interesting is what happens in sales then impacts on the rental market. So while sales has had this patchy rollercoaster ride, it means for those properties that haven't sold, is they put them into rentals. So we've had an oversupply. What does that mean for tenants? It means lots of choice, and it means that for some as well with the interest rates, is they're choosing, I won't be a tenant, I'll buy. So from a landlord's perspective now, they're thinking, haven't sold my property, that's fine, I'll rent it. But they're not getting the rental return, in some cases lower, and having already spent the money and had the pain in trying to sell it, they're not keen to having to wait to rent the property. So that's had an impact on us. So renters have had a benefit, but from a landlord's perspective, it's been the ideal time to upgrade or buy another investment property.
Okay, now speaking of the market forces, I've spoken to some competitors, which we do occasionally, had a really good chat with a couple of them. They're all saying that withdrawn properties and going across to rentals or staying put is become quite endemic. Mm-hmm. Any comment? I mean, you've commented a lot of those gone into property management. Yeah. What about you, Tim?
Certainly have the feeling that over the last year there's been a lot more withdrawn properties than normal, and withdrawn from our point of view obviously slide across to property management, or people say, no, I'm staying where I am. And I would have said, just as a rough rule of thumb, maybe as much as 50% more than normal would be withdrawn and people stay put.
And they get quite grumpy when they end up with an advertising bill and so on, which is to be expected.
And then when we get them, they're what I call the reluctant landlord, because they didn't really want to rent their property; they really wanted to sell it.
That's a 2013 term, the reluctant
landlord.
Yeah, and that really is a landlord who doesn't want to invest in property necessarily. No. That's just the second choice by default. And
they don't want to do any more to maintain it, because what you need to do under residential tenancies to let a property, they might not have needed to do for the sale of the home.
Right.
All those little bits and pieces, so it's quite interesting.
Okay, now let's just drill down a little bit deeper. So what's caused this? Why has it suddenly gone a bit funny?
Well, if you go back to last financial year, I guess the beginning of last year, interest rates were coming down. So there was this slide of interest rates, and I think people were just waiting to find the bottom. So they were always preempting, well, there'll be a drop again soon, so we'll wait before we purchase. A little bit of stability crept in at the end of last year and into the beginning of this year. So I think people, having had their plans on hold for a year and a half or so, as well as that stability, thought, let's get on with it. Let's move with the times. So we've had a nice little flurry of activity. Now we've got the world's longest lead into an election, which is just ridiculous. We've got the possibility of interest rates moving. We've got the Aussie dollar dropping. There's a whole raft of different things that we haven't had to deal with 3 or 4 months ago.
And I think that from a global perspective, from the rental side, is that relocation agents that we normally be talking to all the time because they're moving people are not moving them, they're staying put in their own country, so that means that's impacting on sales as well as rentals, but also their budgets have tightened, so whereas they'd give 800,000, now they're down at 600, 700. So it's impacting that higher end, and that's where the biggest impact's been in sales. So they put them into rental, but they're not achieving what they need or what they expected.
Okay, so this last 2 weeks, I've noticed across the entire team that the activity has very noticeably stalled. My view of the world is that the Rudd challenge and the leadership issues have been so intense that it's become a great focus, and I don't think people intentionally just stop transacting, but that's overlaid with the stock market issues, talk of China issues. So to me, it's pretty obvious why the last couple of weeks in particular have been very, very patchy. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think people also, as humans are, they love the hope after the election. So now there's something to put it off to, not to think about, and it'll be better after the election.
Right, okay. So just in a nutshell, who are you voting with, guys?
I think it's a foregone conclusion, isn't it?
I don't know.
I think it is.
It would be pretty ugly, I think, if there wasn't a change.
Did someone, what's that expression? Time for a change, I think, has been said.
Yeah, well, that's an old saying. But
yes.
On a serious note, without any political agenda, do you think, and this is purely your opinion, in the marketplace, will it make an impact which way it goes, or do we just want the election out of the way?
My feeling is we want it out of the way, but I think it will have an effect because there's always traditionally been a bit more activity after any election, regardless of who wins, because suddenly people have direction again, and we haven't had direction for a while. Now we need it to keep things moving.
I agree with that. I think it's also not only will we have direction, is there also won't be an excuse. So people will have to get on. Life moves on.
Okay. Well, Tim and Kerry, 3 years on Toop TV, and thank you for being our guest today.
Pleasure.
And
Excellent.
Stay tuned for the next chapter.
Great.
Now let's go to Going, Going, Gone.